Footage of Foolio's final moments just leaked and it's shaking everything up, but that's only half the story.
I heard him take his last, bro.
His driver, who was right there, took bullets and survived, is finally speaking out, and what he's revealing is wild. I've got all the details. Let's get into it. The final breath. The new footage that just surfaced is absolutely heartbreaking. It captures Foolio's final moments, on the ground, flinching, struggling to dodge bullets as they tore through the night. An image from the scene shows the aftermath. Jacksonville's rising drill star lies motionless outside a Tampa hotel in the early hours of June 23, 2024. Now, the story behind those last images is coming to light thanks to one man, Omerta 55. He wasn't a bystander. He wasn't watching from afar. He was right there. The hours leading up to Foolio's death were supposed to be a safe escape. Jacksonville had long been a war zone for the young rapper, locked in ongoing feuds and public beefs that put a target on his back. So for his birthday, he'd chosen Tampa, hoping to avoid the constant danger back home. The plan: celebrate with friends, enjoy a pool party, hit the clubs, just live a little without looking over their shoulders. For Omerta 55, the trip hadn't even been planned. A last-minute call brought him to Tampa, and as he would later explain, when he got there, the vibe couldn't have felt more positive.
When I got there, he was walking outside, he seen me, he started smiling. Like, he was happy to see me, so it was like, you feel me, I was in a good mood, you feel me, my dog was in a good mood, he just wanted to celebrate his birthday, so everything was great.
That night, there was no talk of enemies or beefs. It was friends, music, good energy. Foolio seemed genuinely happy, surrounded by people he trusted. But what none of them could know was that a minor hiccup in their plans would prove fatal. After the club, the group headed back to the hotel, a Holiday Inn in Tampa, only to discover their reservations had been glitched. The rooms weren't available. So Foolio and his crew, tired, tipsy, phones in hand, sat in the car, looking for new options. A few minutes later, that parking lot would turn into a death trap.
So we got to the hotel, went in, the rooms was already reserved, but I guess they had like a glitch in the system or something, so they ain't let us get the room. So then he came back out to the car and we was just chilling, trying to figure out like where we was finna go.
Those moments of delay sealed their fate because someone, whether from outside or tipped off from within the party, now knew exactly where Foolio was. Exposed, parked, vulnerable. The last recordings now leaked show Foolio moments later, shot, lying on the pavement. His birthday celebration turned to bloodshed. But what that grainy footage can't show is what was happening inside the car. The fear, the chaos, the final seconds of life. And it was Omerta in the driver's seat, struck by bullets, who witnessed what no camera could.
Prior to us getting to the hotel, he had called and made reservations. And then we got to the hotel, he went in, checked in, and they told him that the rooms already been taken. So he came back to the car. He was on his phone trying to find a hotel. I'm just on point watching everything. Looked down at my phone for like a split second, and then something just like ain't feel right. So as soon as I look up, I just see, you feel me, shooters. I just kept telling him to duck. He wasn't really saying much. I ain't really hear him say really, cause the gunfire was so loud. I already knew when I stopped the car, cause he wasn't responding. I heard him take his last, bro.
That moment, I heard him take his last breath, has now shaken fans and the entire hip-hop world. Because while millions have now seen the leaked recording, only Omerta lived through it, sitting in the seat next to a dying friend, helpless as the shots rang out. The responsibility on Omerta's shoulders that night wasn't random. In the world Foolio lived in, the driver is more than just someone behind the wheel. It's a trusted role, the one meant to keep everyone safe. And for Omerta, that wasn't just a job. It was about loyalty to a close friend.
Like, yeah. If we went around each other, we was talking almost every day for sure.
He wasn't a casual crew member. This was someone Foolio spoke to daily, who had earned a seat in that car, which is why when the shots came and survivor's guilt set in, Omerta would be left questioning it all. Could he have done more? Should he have driven a different route? Why had he even come that night? The randomness of it all still haunts him, because originally, he wasn't supposed to be there.
Me going was last minute. I ain't had no plans of going.
A spur-of-the-moment trip, a few minutes stuck in a hotel parking lot, a birthday that turned fatal. It's these small twists of fate that make the tragedy even harder to process. One minute, they were checking for new rooms, thinking about what after-hour spot to hit. The next, the car was surrounded by gunmen. When the first shots hit, Omerta had one instinct: get everyone home alive.
Shit, I just want everybody to make it home.
But with 8 bullets tearing through his arm and 3 more grazing his head, escape became almost impossible.
And how many times were you shot?
I got shot in my arm 8 times. I got grazed in my head 3 times.
It's a miracle he survived at all. And as he later said, through all the gunfire, his mind never stopped repeating one question. Was everyone okay? The surveillance cameras captured the gunmen, the flashes, the blood, but they couldn't show what happened inside that car. As Omerta tried to pull his broken body upright, reaching for Foolio only to realize it was too late. Foolio was unresponsive, and Omerta, barely able to move, could do nothing but flee for help.
My first thought was to pull Foolio out the car, but then I realized my arm was broke and he wasn't responding, so you feel me, in my mind, I'm just like, damn.
That's the human cost behind the viral last recordings everyone's been watching. Not just another rapper gone, not just another headline, but a young man gunned down on his birthday, his final breath witnessed by his closest friend, and another left alive, with the wounds, the trauma, and the questions that may never be answered. The war that led to this moment. To understand the gravity of what happened that night. In Tampa, we need to step back and examine the complex web of rivalry, music, and violence that ultimately led to Foolio's death. The story of that night in Tampa cannot be told without understanding the broader context of a war that had been raging in Jacksonville's streets for nearly a decade. The feud between Julio Foolio, representing the KTA gang, Kill Them All, and Young Gene Ace, leading the ATK gang, Ace's top killers, is a significant and violent rivalry rooted in Jacksonville, Florida's gang culture. This conflict began long before either rapper achieved fame, with roots that trace back to personal losses and gang territories that had been disputed for years. The rivalry wasn't just about music or street credibility, it was deeply personal, rooted in real loss and genuine grief that had been weaponized and turned into public spectacle. What started as legitimate mourning for lost family members evolved into a cycle of retaliation that would consume the lives of young men on both sides. The transformation of personal pain into public warfare represents one of the most troubling aspects of how social media and music can amplify real-world conflicts. The feud's origins trace back to May 2017, when Zion Brown, Julio Foolio's cousin, was killed in a home invasion on Jacksonville's west side. This incident marked the beginning of a cycle of retaliation that would spiral out of control over the next 7 years. What started as personal grief transformed into a public war, amplified by social media and drill rap music that turned real-life violence into viral entertainment. The death of Zion Brown wasn't just another casualty in Jacksonville's ongoing violence, it was the spark that would ignite a war. For Foolio, this was family, someone he had grown up with, someone whose death demanded justice or revenge depending on one's perspective. The personal nature of this loss would fuel years of anger and retaliation, setting in motion events that would ultimately lead to his own death in a Tampa parking lot 7 years later. The escalation was swift and deadly, with each act of violence begetting another in an endless cycle that seemed to have no possible resolution other than complete destruction of one side or the other. The speed with which the conflict escalated shows how quickly personal grievances can spin out of control when combined with gang affiliations, social media amplification, and the glorification of violence in music.
So, I mean, you're a whole generation away from him. He was 7 years older than you.
The generational aspect of this conflict is particularly troubling, as evidenced by Omerta's age. At just 19 years old, Omerta had been exposed to a level of violence that most people never experience in a lifetime. He represents a generation that has grown up surrounded by this conflict, for whom gang warfare and retaliation have been normalized as part of life in Jacksonville. This normalization of violence among young people represents one of the most devastating long-term consequences of these feuds. In June 2018, a retaliatory shooting at a town center restaurant saw Young Gene Ace shot 8 times but survived, while 3 others were killed: Trayvon Bullard, 18, Royale Devon Smith Jr., 18, and Jacoby Deshad Groover, 19. Foolio would later glorify this attack on social media, wearing a t-shirt with the victims' faces and releasing a song called Voodoo, claiming to have cursed Young Gene Ace's crew. This incident represented a major escalation in the conflict, transforming it from a series of individual grievances into a full-scale war between organized groups. The fact that Young Gene Ace survived 8 gunshots while his friends died around him added another layer of trauma and motivation for revenge. Foolio's decision to mock this tragedy publicly through clothing and music showed how deeply the conflict had poisoned any possibility of peace or reconciliation. The violence continued to escalate throughout 2019, with each incident adding fuel to an already raging fire. The year 2019 would prove to be particularly devastating for both sides. with multiple murders that would further entrench the hatred between the groups and make any resolution seem impossible. In January, Willie Addison, Boss Goon, was killed outside Paradise Gentlemen's Club, with family members of Kasu injured in the same incident. That same month, Charles Quentin McCormick Jr., Lil Buck, a KTA rapper, was also killed. But perhaps the most devastating blow to Foolio came in February 2019, when the conflict claimed someone even closer to home. His 16-year-old little brother, Adrian Denard Gaynor Jr., Bibby, was killed at a Moncrief apartment complex. This loss would haunt Foolio for the rest of his life and add an even more personal dimension to his music and his motivations for revenge. The death of Bibby represented the conflict's most personal blow to Foolio. This wasn't just a friend or associate. This was his little brother, someone he was supposed to protect, someone whose death he would likely blame himself for in addition to blaming his enemies. The guilt and rage from this loss would fuel some of his most emotional and violent music, while also making any possibility of peace with his rivals even more remote. These weren't just statistics. They were real people, family members, friends. Each death added fuel to a fire that was already burning out of control. The pain was real, but so was the way this pain was weaponized through music and social media. The transformation of genuine grief into entertainment content represents one of the most troubling aspects of how drill rap culture can perpetuate violence while claiming to simply document it. The feud has been amplified by the drill rap scene, with both ATK and KTA using music as a platform for diss tracks. Music became both a way to process grief and a weapon to inflict further pain, creating a cycle where art and violence fed off each other in increasingly destructive ways. The drill rap scene provided a platform for these conflicts to reach wider audiences, turning local disputes into viral content that attracted national attention. The most notorious example is ATK's Who I Smoke, which became a cultural phenomenon while simultaneously serving as a very public disrespect to the dead. Released in March 2021 by Youngin Ace, Spinna Benz, Fast Money Goon, and Wappa Wit Da Choppa, which samples 1,000 Miles by Vanessa Carlton and targets Foolio. This track gained massive popularity on social media, achieving gold certification by the RIAA in July 2022. The song wasn't just entertainment, it was a public mockery of the dead, turning real victims into punchlines for viral success. The use of Vanessa Carlton's innocent pop song as the backdrop for lyrics celebrating murder added an additional layer of darkness to the track. The success of Who I Smoke demonstrated how violence could be monetized and how real deaths could become the foundation for musical careers, creating perverse incentives for continued conflict. Conversely, KTA's When I See You by Foolio also garnered significant attention with nearly 1 million views in 12 hours. Foolio's response tracks were equally disrespectful and threatening, ensuring that the cycle of musical warfare would continue. Each song was not just a response, but an escalation, with both sides trying to outdo each other in terms of disrespect and threats. This musical warfare had real-world consequences that extended far beyond streaming numbers and social media views. Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkhoff stated that the attack was part of an ongoing feud in Jacksonville, lasting over a decade and involving dozens of murders. The lines between entertainment and reality had become dangerously blurred, the music videos and lyrics serving as both documentation of violence and incitement for future attacks. When asked about his stance on the ongoing war, Omerta's response revealed both wisdom and weariness beyond his years, showing how young people caught up in these conflicts often just want to escape but feel trapped by circumstances and loyalties. His perspective provides insight into how someone can be affected by violence without being a primary participant, and how difficult it can be to separate oneself from conflicts that have consumed entire communities.
As far as like the people that this whole Jacksonville war, like where do you stand at with it?
Man, I'm just a rapper.
Cause and the reason why I asked that too, I'm not trying to be on no detective, but when I hear you rap, I hear soul, I hear like I could tell like you're when I mean good kid, I ain't calling you a square, but I could tell you have a purpose. I could tell you're a really smart guy.
His response showed the internal conflict many young artists face in this environment, torn between loyalty to friends and a desire to pursue music without the baggage of violence. The interviewer's observation about Omerta's potential highlights the tragedy of how many young people with real talent and intelligence get caught up in conflicts that limit their possibilities and threaten their futures. Still, how this tragedy has affected those left behind, the legal proceedings that followed, and what the future holds for a music scene forever changed by violence needs to be talked about. Aftermath, justice, and the weight of survival. In the aftermath of that devastating night in Tampa, ripple effects continue to spread through Jacksonville's music community, the legal system, and most personally, through the lives of those who survived. For Omerta 5-5, the physical wounds would heal, but the emotional scars and the weight of survivors' guilt would prove to be a more complex challenge to overcome. The journey from victim to survivor to witness would test him in ways that no young person should ever have to endure. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of medical treatment, police investigations, and coming to terms with the reality of what had happened. Omerta's injuries were severe: 8 gunshot wounds to his arm and 3 grazes to his head. The medical team's ability to save his life represented a miracle in itself, but survival was just the beginning of a long and painful recovery process that would involve both physical rehabilitation and psychological healing. The nature of his head injuries, while not immediately life-threatening, served as a constant reminder of how close he had come to death. The everyday activities that most people take for granted became challenging and painful, serving as physical reminders of the trauma he had experienced.
Man, I know we spoke the other night and I'm like, you were grazed 3 times in the head, right?
Yeah.
I've never been shot before. How does a graze is when a bullet, like it's kind of like a...
It's kind of like a little swipe, kind of like getting scratched, like it was kind of like getting scratched type.
Despite the severity of his injuries, Omerta's primary concern wasn't for himself, a selflessness that speaks to his character, but also suggests the depth of shock and denial that often accompanies severe trauma. His focus on others rather than his own condition reflects both his loyalty to his friends and a psychological coping mechanism that allowed him to function in the immediate aftermath of the shooting. The ability to prioritize others' welfare over his own, even while suffering from multiple gunshot wounds, demonstrates the kind of mental strength that would be necessary for his eventual recovery. However, this same selflessness would later contribute to the guilt and self-blame that would haunt his healing process.
I had to calm myself down, you feel me? I really, honestly and truthfully, I wouldn't even think about myself in the moment at all. I was just in my head, like, you feel me? I'm just telling myself, like, reassuring myself, like, bro, all right, bro, good. That's all I really was telling myself. I wouldn't even think about me, really.
The psychological impact was immediate and overwhelming, manifesting in ways that would take months or even years to fully understand and process. Survivor's guilt is a complex phenomenon that affects people differently, but for someone as young as Omerta, who had accepted responsibility as the driver and protector, the burden was particularly heavy. The weight of feeling responsible for his friend's death, despite being a victim himself, created a psychological burden that no amount of physical healing could address. When the reality of Foolio's death began to sink in, Omerta was consumed by a crushing sense of responsibility that went far beyond what any reasonable person would expect from someone in his position. The irrational nature of survivor's guilt doesn't make it any less real or painful for those who experience it.
As days go by, what's going through your mind?
Remorse, guilt, blame, really.
You put the blame on you?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I was the driver, you feel me? Like I said, in my head, my main purpose was to get us home, and I ain't do that. So I definitely blame myself at first.
This survivor's guilt is a common but devastating psychological response to traumatic events, but understanding its prevalence doesn't diminish its impact on those who experience it. Here was a 19-year-old who had literally been shot 8 times, yet he was blaming himself for not being able to protect his friend. The weight of that responsibility, feeling like he had failed in his most basic duty as a driver and protector, added another layer of trauma to an already unimaginable situation. The legal system moved swiftly to pursue justice, recognizing the high-profile nature of the case and the need to prevent further retaliation. The investigation's speed and thoroughness demonstrated law enforcement's understanding that this wasn't just another street crime, but part of a larger pattern of violence that threatened the safety of the entire community. The investigation relied heavily on surveillance footage, which captured the suspects following Foolio from nightclubs to the hotel where he was killed. Tampa police did. Juan Ramos testified in court, presenting videos that showed the shooters in masks firing at Foolio's vehicle around 4:30 a.m. on June 23, 2024. The technological aspect of the investigation, using surveillance cameras, license plate readers, and phone records, showed how modern law enforcement techniques could be brought to bear on even the most complex and dangerous criminal cases. The ability to track the suspects' movements throughout the night painted a picture of premeditation and planning that would be crucial in securing convictions. All 5 suspects have been charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The severity of these charges reflects both the nature of the crime and the state's determination to pursue the strongest possible punishment for those responsible. Bond was denied for all suspects during pretrial detention hearings, with the state arguing they pose a danger to the community. The decision to deny bond for all suspects was significant, reflecting the court's recognition of both the danger they posed and the likelihood that they might attempt to flee or intimidate witnesses. This decision also provided some measure of comfort to survivors and victims' families, knowing that those accused of the crime would remain in custody throughout the legal proceedings. The state of Florida has filed a notice to seek the death penalty for 3 suspects: Davion Murphy, Sean Gathright, and Rashad Murphy. This decision reflects the severity of the crime and the state's stance on gang-related violence. The pursuit of the death penalty adds gravity to the proceedings and sends a message about how seriously the state takes gang-related violence. However, it also means that the legal process will be longer and more complex, potentially extending the period of uncertainty and pain for survivors and victims' families. For Omerta, watching the arrests unfold brought mixed emotions rather than the satisfaction or closure that many might expect. His reaction reveals the complexity of being both a victim and a key witness in a high-profile criminal case, where the pursuit of justice becomes intertwined with personal trauma and recovery.
Tuesday, 4 people get arrested, and then another one 3 people get arrested, then another one did that night. What was your feelings? How do you feel when you seen these people get caught?
Tell you the truth, I ain't really think nothing of it, really. I ain't really think nothing of it. I really wasn't even on social media that day. I ain't really too much care, to tell you the truth.
The fact that he didn't recognize any of the suspects added another layer of confusion and pain to the situation. This wasn't personal in the way that many might assume. These weren't people from ongoing disputes or familiar faces from the neighborhood. They were strangers who had tracked and targeted Foolio based solely on gang affiliations and the broader feud consuming Jacksonville's music scene, making the violence feel even more senseless and random. The recovery process, both physical and emotional, would be long and challenging, requiring not just medical intervention, but also psychological support and time to process the trauma. The physical healing, while significant and encouraging, represented just one aspect of a much more complex recovery journey.
So how's your arm doing?
I mean, the healing process is going faster than expected. I done got movement back in my arm, bullet holes hitting up decent. Feel me? I mean, I still been in a lot of pain some days, but other than that, it's just like, shit. Just like having like a bolt arm.
The physical healing, while significant, was just one part of his recovery. The metaphor of having a bolt on suggests both the ongoing discomfort and the way that trauma becomes a permanent part of one's life, not necessarily debilitating, but always present as a reminder of what happened. The recovery of movement in his arm represented a major victory, but the psychological healing would prove to be a longer and more complex process. Perhaps the most painful realization for Omerta was how tragedy had paradoxically elevated his own profile as an artist, creating opportunities that came at the cost of tremendous personal loss. This recognition represents one of the cruelest ironies of violence in the music industry, how personal tragedy can become a pathway to professional opportunity, creating complicated feelings about success and survival.
I remember we was on the phone a couple days ago and you said it's that this had to happen for people to know that I could actually rap.
Yeah.
It's that I had to lose my friend to get notoriety on my music, to get interviews, to get people to reach out to me. And I felt you on that.
This is a brutal reality that many artists in violent communities face. Success often comes at the cost of tremendous personal loss. The fact that Omerta's talent and music are now receiving attention because of his survival of a tragic event, rather than on their own merit, adds another layer of complexity to his path forward, as an artist and as a person trying to heal from trauma. The impact on Jacksonville's music scene has been profound and lasting, extending far beyond just the loss of one artist to encompass questions about the future of the entire local hip-hop community. Foolio's death created ripple effects that touched every aspect of the scene, from other artists' safety concerns to the industry's willingness to invest in Jacksonville talent.